Saltmero's Shelpit rested under a vast glass dome that held in brine and echo. Stone heroes ringed the promenade, their carved gazes set on a city where the Council of Quiet had outlawed singing after a chorus shook a courthouse. The arena felt dignified and watched, every sound contained. The band turned every hum into a risk, and every statue into a reminder of order. Morris, an iridescent salmon cuttlefish with freckled dapples and a pale-tipped left tentacle, polished a plaque along the arena wall. He drifted with careful sweeps as if the metal's shine mattered. He muttered that soda was spicy and insisted that this was nature, not opinion. Morris said, "It bites the tongue, therefore it is spice." Esther, salmon-hued with blush bands on her fins and a tiny coral charm tied at her siphon, snorted soft bubbles. She corrected him, saying he confused sing with spice and promised he would one day taste a chili and learn the scale. Her tone mixed teasing and certainty. Esther said, "You'll meet a real pepper and finally admit the truth." Wendell, broader and calmer, wore a collar fin that faded from salmon to rose and flashed checkerboard bursts when he thought. He tried to steer them back to larger concerns. He said the city had bigger problems and that he'd admired their taste and stubbornness despite their sworn enemy tradition. Wendell said, "We can argue flavor forever, but not while the city wobbles." They kept the Shelpit dignified, mopping silt, oiling hinges, and wiping pigeonfish residue from statues. Their promise to Old Man Brine, the retiring groundskeeper, guided their nights and days. Any threat to the hero's dignity became theirs to face first. Morris said, "We promised him, and we meant it." Esther said, "No one turns them into jokes on our watch." Below the seats, a shuttered lounge slept with a broken neon sign and a humming karaoke machine that still flashed pink. The machine sometimes leaked a T-80s riff through ductwork as if it remembered better nights. Everyone knew singing was illegal, but the hum kept daring the silence. Wendell said, "That thing is asking for trouble." Sir Slopulus III, an ivory eel with a butter sheen, a snout scar, and a coral monocle, coiled through the staff tunnel like an owner on inspection. Beside him swayed Countess Slopula, ivory as a candle, with frilled gills, a gold tooth, and freckles that glowed. Their presence bent conversations quiet. Slopulus said, "Efficiency demands our attention." Slopula said, "And obedience." Their motive leaked from their smiles. The arena burgers were only 22% real meat, and protests had begun. They decided to drown the scandal in laughter by putting clown wigs on every public statue so no one would focus on ingredients. It was a distraction dressed as civic fun. Slopulus said, "Let them laugh instead of ask." Slopulus said, "The numbers will stop mattering." They executed the mechanics with cold efficiency. Rainbow wigs arrived through the loading docks wrapped in thick bubble wrap. Schedules were posted for midnight cruise, and drones would crown every statue by sunrise. In a dry kiosk under a humming air bubble, a human Italian pizza chef tossed high while flour drifted like snow under a heat lamp. No one remarked on the absurdity. Within hours of the test, a bronze general wore orange curls and the crowd hooted. Gossip currents turned toward the stunt instead of meat percentages. The eels donated to the Council of Quiet and got extra patrols to guard wigs in the name of decorum. Slopulus said, "Order must be protected." A guard said, "We enforce cheer now." Morris swam up to Sir Slopulus by a wigged statue and challenged the insult. The eel regarded him through the monocle with a cold slide of the eye, and said the Shelpit stood only on his money. Morris held his ground despite the chill in his mantle. Morris said, "Not while I clean these stones." Slopulus said, "Then learn who pays for them." Esther confronted Countess Slopula near the vendor ring and called the wigs a fraud on top of a larger fraud. The Countess lifted her chin and told her to mop, not moralize. Wendell tried to keep the peace while Freddie, a tiny mahogany cockroach in a thimble helmet, adjusted his gear and delivered a flat joke. Freddie said, "I don't mop, I skate on disaster." They traced wig crates to the shuttered lounge and found Shad, Tiff, and David 3 rose pink urchins rattling spines at the humming machine. It belted an 80s power hymn about rose pink heroes of the kelp and refused to stop. a beacon for guards if anyone reported it. The trio exchanged worried looks. Wendell said, "That song will draw patrols." Chad said, "We didn't mean to start a war." Up on the concourse, the coffee stall waged a silly war. Argyle the barista poet thundered espresso-free verse while Nima countered with foam haiku, and Freddie collected their loyalty cards like medals. The mood turned competitive and theatrical. Freddie said, "Culture comes with a stamp." Argyle said, "Only if it rhymes with crema." That night the eels took the upper hand in full view. Drones slipped under the dome and fitted wigs onto statues, while Slopulus posed for bubble cameras. Cheers bounced off the glass. Esther watched with her fins tight. Wendell said, "We're losing the crowd." The Council of Quiet endorsed the eels' donations and warned that tampering with wigs would be treated as vandalism against civic cheer. Notices appeared in staff halls, and maintenance access codes went onto a watch list. The rulebook tilted against the trio. Morris said, "They're protecting the joke." Esther said, "Then we write a better rule." Hey, quick break. If you're enjoying this dive under the dome, please click like and subscribe to keep the current flowing. Drop a comment with the word slop so the algorithm knows you're on the team. Your support helps us scrub more statues and unmask more scams. After midnight they tried a quiet fix by swapping wigs for plain caps. Freddie jittered on a crate and dropped a cap with a hard clank, waking alarms red and angry. Countess Slopulus wept in and promised their contract would be ashes by dawn. Freddie said, "Note to self, softer crates." Slopulus said, "Note to you, goodbye." They lost their access bans and got shooed to the visitor shallows to hear fans laugh. Morris blamed respect for spicy soda. Esther snapped that this was the wrong time, and Wendell urged them to breathe. Freddie tripped, saluted, and said gravity was his only loyal fan. Morris said, "This isn't over." Wendell said, "Not if we think first." The eels tightened their grip with a fireworks show on the arena floor. Barks spun under the dome while clowns danced around statues, and burger lines curled long and careless. No one asked what 22% meant. Slopulus said, "Look at the joy." Esther said, "Look at the smoke." They tried leaking evidence to the coffee stall poets, but the poets turned it into a duel-over meter. Their pamphlet dissolved into napkin origami labeled sonnet and haiku. The scandal sank under foam and form. Nima said, 17 beats or nothing. Argyle said, "The couplet closes the case." The karaoke machine hit a fevered apex the next day, blasting an 80s-styled anthem about roast-pink urchins saving prom night through every vent. Cars had started listening for singing to enforce the ban. So Shad, Tiff, and David begged for help. The trio hurried to the lounge. Tiff said, "They'll be here any minute." Wendell said, "Then we fix it now." Morris suggested a soda bath to short the machine, arguing the spicy fizz would shock the ghost. Esther said fizz was acid, not spice. Wendell wedged himself under the cabinet to reroute power while Freddie skittered across parking wires and muttered that he was trained in poor choices. Morris said, "One splash." Esther said, "One fuse, not one splash." They choked the speaker into silence and the room fell heavy and still. They had lost their jobs. The city wanted quiet, and the eels kept winning. Hope felt far away. Wendell said, "We breathe, then we plan." Esther said, "We're not done." They argued because fighting felt easier than despair. Morris called Esther a flavor denier. Esther called him a theatrical menu, and Wendell praised their fire, but scolded their aim. Freddie admitted he was afraid of being squished and forgot how to be funny for a beat. Wendell said, "Fear is fine. Aim it better." They returned to the lounge and faced the machine with the urchins watching. Wendell asked what it wanted, and wobbling lights suggested it only wanted to be heard without breaking the law. The answer felt simple and strict. Wendell said, "We can give you time without words." Chad said, "We can keep time too." Esther proposed a workaround. Let the ghost keep time instead of singing. The council had banned words, not rhythm. Freddie grounded the chassis with his tin helmet. Shad scraped spines like brushes. Tiff tapped a clave pattern, and David thumped the bass until the machine settled into a lawful beat. Esther said, "Rhythm only." Wendell said, "That we can defend." Chad, Tiff, and David joined the team with clear roles. Chad would coordinate with spine taps. Tiff knew the narrowest tunnels, and David's spines could pierce and carry bubble wrap like a toolkit. The wig crates wrapping would matter. Chad said, "We're in." David said, "We'll make the wrap work for us." Freddie shared an observation he had kept quiet. He said the eels could not pass a crate corner without popping 3 bubbles, and a patrolling eel proved it by drifting off route to press his snout to plastic. The weakness clicked into place. Freddie said, "Compulsion. 3 pops minimum." Morris said, "Then we build a path of traps." Tiff led them through service pipes to a warehouse where wigs towered to the ceiling. Chad and David rolled bubble wrap into long runners, while Morris mapped pathways between stacks. Freddie set trip lines at irresistible corners. Tiff said, "Narrow turns force pauses." Morris said, "And pauses pop." Esther tricked badge locks with a borrowed battery, and booted the karaoke machine's metronome to sync movements. Wendell practiced flashing checkerboard bursts in rhythm, while upstairs the coffee war escalated into foam calligraphy dripping slow bins about art. The beat tied their pieces together. Esther said, "Stay on the click." Wendell said, "I'll be the light." They shaped the plan because luck had run out. Bubble wrap would lure the eels, rhythm would push them, the path would funnel into a clear holding pit, and a gate would close when Freddie hit the lever. The eel's own compulsion would hold them long enough for the council to see the truth. Wendell said, "We use what they can't resist." Freddie said, "I can hit a lever on cue." And now a word from our sponsor. Control Works presents just one more lane. Bro, a ludicrously effective cup sleeve that adds a bonus cooling lane to any drink so you never end up with hot coffee when you wanted it cold. In Saltmero, that means your iced brew stays crisp even under dome lights, unlike certain plans that melt under pressure. If the wig crisis had the sleeve, the only thing heating up would be the eel's tempers. Get your chill under control. We just did. They baited the path with a rumor that vandals would torch the wigs, and Sir Slopulus arrived with a squad as if pulled by a magnet. He hissed that he would enjoy billing them for every bubble burst. The team faded ahead down the route. Slopulus said, "Count each pop." Morris said, "We will." Countess Slopula arrived with a glittering escort and smiled coldly at Esther. Freddie quipped that 22% of her grin was customer service. Ahead, Shad started a faint popping rhythm that tugged at the eel's senses like a drumline. Slopula said, "Forward." Esther said, "Right where we want you." They followed the sound despite orders, draping themselves over the bubble paths like cats claiming warmth. David rolled fresh sheets ahead, and the popping rose into a syncopated crackle that even guards twitched toward. The compulsion took hold stride by stride. Wendell said, "Keep the tempo." David said, "New sheet coming in." Slopulus tried to halt, but Wendell's checkerboard pulses and the metronome beat wrapped the path. Tiff narrowed the route with bundled rolls, and the squad crowded forward. Each eel stopped to pop with heads bowed like penitents. Slopulus said, "Hold." Tiff said, "Too late." The path opened onto the arena floor where a clear-walled pit waited. The trio retreated across the bubble carpet as Freddie performed a jittery stumble into the control panel, then yanked the lever. The gate groaned awake. Freddie said, "I meant to do that." Wendell said, "Good timing." Countess Slopula lunged and nearly caught Esther's fin, but Esther blasted a soda spritzer. The fizz snapped and hissed on the wrap, and Esther admitted maybe it was a tiny bit spicy after all. The sound made the eels quiver and chase right into the pit. Esther said, "Just enough heat." Slopula said, "No." Morris signaled the urchins and the machine thumped an 80s-style popping rhythm like a march. Chad, Tiff, and David hammered a counter-pop on the rim. Slopulus and Slopula pressed noses to plastic and could not stop. Morris said, "Keep the beat." Chad said, "On your mark." Slopulus tried to bark orders between pops, but gasps broke his voice as his snout hammered bubbles. Guards succumbed the same way. Freddie saluted and said their escape plan was now 22%, which was to say none. Slopulus said, stand pop down. Freddie said, math checks out. Morris flashed the crate labels onto the arena's projection glass. Only 22% real meat in large letters. The Council of Quiet arrived to investigate noise and saw the numbers. The compulsion and the trap. Outrage tightened their faces. Morris said, now look. A counselor said, we see. Security stripped the eels of badges and clasped restraints on their tails while they kept popping like metronomes that could not find the end. The wigs were declared evidence and removed from statues in neat piles. The plan hissed out. A guard said, evidence only. Slopulus said, this is indecorous. Volunteers streamed in to help as the trio supervised gentle cleansing of stone and bronze with soft brushes and cloths. The karaoke ghost kept a steady beat without words, and the council did not stop it because rhythm helped the work. The arena felt cooperative again. Wendell said, keep it steady. Esther said, gentle, always. The coffee stall poets called a truce and read a joint ode to truth that tasted like crema and did not burn. They donated their stash of packing bubble wrap, the last needed to line the pit floor so no eel could catch a breath between temptations. Their feud cooled into service. Argyle said, for the city. Nima said, for the beat. The Council of Quiet announced an inquiry into their own law, saying rhythm was not a crime and words might return with care. Burger stalls closed for audit and never reopened under eel names. The shell pit smelled like brine and stone again instead of fryer smoke. A counselor said, balance, not silence. Wendell said, we can live with that. Esther turned to Morris as the last wig was plucked and said soda might be a little spicy for cephalopods when used as a weapon. Morris admitted he liked the drama more than the taste. Wendell laughed until his checkerboard flickered like a disco. Esther said, I'll allow a tiny scorch. Morris said, I'll allow the applause. Chad, Tiff, and David were thanked with reef-side rhythm nights where the ghost kept perfect time and no words were needed. Freddie received a new unshipped helmet and a tiny cape from the poets and announced he had been promoted to fashionable hazard. The team felt whole. Freddie said, rank, stylishly unsafe. Chad said, beats good tonight. All around the promenade the statues stood bare and dignified again. The trio reclaimed their maintenance badges with new authority and promised old man Brine they would never let a joke swallow a city. They kept one roll of bubble wrap as a reminder that weakness, rhythm, and friends could save a world without a song. Morris said, we keep it honest. Esther said, we keep it clean. All the slop in this video was generated using AI. This note is for transparency, not celebration. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and comment the word slop to help others find it. Thank you for swimming with us under the dome.